Hello, this is Colin. It's time for the news. So this week, we have a special treat for you. Of course, I could conceivably claim that on any given week, and some of the time I would be quite wrong. But we are going to focus on Timothy Olyphant today. I'm calling it the Oliphantisance, although several of my panelists have pointed out that Timothy Olyphant kind of never goes away. He's like always in something. He's in The Mandalorian. Anyway, he's got 2 series out right now. I mean, they're not his exactly. One of them is Justified City Primeval. He's even the producer of that, and he's reviving the role of Raylan Givens that he did in the original Justified, also performing with his actual real-life daughter. And Full Circle is more of a Steven Soderbergh jam. Olyphant has a big role in it, but so do a lot of people. Some very complicated international politics and a thriller and a lot of other stuff besides. Here comes the news, and then here comes the nose. That is the pensive music. That is the theme of the Max series. Max still sounds wrong to say somehow. The Max series, Full Circle, directed by Steven Soderbergh. But that's not really why we're here today. Well, it is why we're here today. But we're here today partly because of one remarkable man, Timothy Olyphant. We're going to tell you a little bit more about that as the nose gets going. Who's on the nose today? Elizabeth Kiefer, a professor emerita of English at Tungus Community College. Heldra Mira, multimedia producer at Trinity College, co-host of the So Pretentious podcast with Vivian Nabetta. Sean Murray is a stand-up comedian, writer, and the host of the Nobody Asked Sean podcast. It's SHAWN if you're trying to search it on your searchy thing. Many people have a searchy thing that's, I think, also called their phone. So, so I was sort of initially kind of positioning this as the Oliphantisance because, or the Oliphantisance, because in fact, Timothy Olyphant is appearing, not starring really, in Full Circle, and then definitely starring in Justified City Primeval, a revival, I think 18 years on from the original Justified series in which he also starred. But Sean, you, I think, persuasively made the argument that there cannot be an Oliphantisance because Timothy, or Timmy as you call him, as Timmy Olyphant never really goes away. So make that argument for the benefit of our listeners.
Well, I mean, Colin, it's been Timmy time on TV for quite a while. I mean, obviously we talked about him on Daisy Jones and the Six. He was on Mandalorian. I mean, he's been on a ton of stuff, and I feel like Justified's been off the air for a few years, and I think a lot of the stuff that he's done has been like relatively minor roles. I think between Full Circle and this is the first time we've seen him back in terms of like being the centerpiece in terms of Justified and a major part of the ensemble in Full Circle. So he's one of those things like he's like the sun in a way. Like you kind of take it for granted. It's like it's always there. And it's not until like it's a really really hot day where you're like, whoa, like. The sun, or even worse, when it's like the sun, it's cloudy day. You're like, wow, I wish the sun was out. That's how you felt before Justified came back on.
Right. That is the most elaborate and beautiful analogy that has ever been made on the nose. Timothy Olyphant as the sun. We will say that you could have seen a lot more Timothy Olyphant because this is something I just found out preparing for this show. He was originally offered the part of someone named Dominic Toretto in what was to become the Fast and Furious franchise. And he thought it was stupid and it would bomb at the box office. And he has subsequently made fun of himself many times.
He was half right.
Well, yes, he was half right. He thought that it was so stupid that it would bomb at the box office. I think that's sort of the way that he got it wrong, that really doesn't mean that it would bomb at the box office. But anyways, he would have been in 19 more movies or however many of them there have been. So let's talk a little bit first about Full Circle and then about Justified, City Primeval. And Sean, since you have the floor, this is a kind of a twisty tale. It really runs on 2 parallel tracks. One of them is a track involving affluent white people who live in a beautiful apartment, which I think might be in Soho. It looks very Upper West Side-y to me, but I think they're in Soho. Doesn't matter where they are. And that includes characters played by Timothy Olyphant, who you may have heard of. He's just like the sun. And Claire Danes, who is nothing like the sun. And her father is played by Dennis Quaid. He is a very successful food entrepreneur. And so the second track is Guyanese people, Guyanese diaspora population in New York City, many of whom are either here without documents or here with documents but operating large, elaborate criminal enterprises. And these two worlds are going to intersect all the way through this very interesting series. Before we get going on the conversation about it, let's hear a little clip here. There's like a mini mild spoiler. This is a first episode thing. So, I mean, it's not a huge spoiler, but if you really have a problem with spoilers, you should maybe put your fingers in your ears for 1 minute and 9 seconds. You're going to hear an FBI agent questioning Claire Danes, who plays Sam Brown. Timothy Olyphant is Derek Brown. And you're going to hear some other detective. And then probably a really important person to know about is Zazie Beetz, who plays Mel Harmony, whose real name is she has the unfortunate real name of Melody Harmony. That's the character's name. And they are talking about a kidnapping kind of gone wrong. This is A1 Gene.
This boy, the one they may have mistaken for yours, any idea who he is?
We know his name is Nicky.
I have a question. Is there a chance this is just a scam? You know, where they try to get money. Do they tend to go to these lengths?
Lengths meaning?
Well, they cut an ear. I mean, a piece, it would appear. I'm just wondering, if maybe it's not as bad.
Can you talk about the person?
Are you saying
who
you
was
don't
on-
know him? You don't know the boy?
Well, we didn't see him. We saw an ear only and part of a cheek.
So, did he have an accent, the guy on the phone?
I don't know. What kind?
I don't know. Maybe, Guyanese?
Guyanese?
Does that mean something to you, or?
Not really. It's just a rather specific place to pull out. Are you sure you don't want anything? Coffee? Water?
Actually, Sean, I'll rotate back to you. I want to get the rest of the panel involved here. So, Elizabeth Kiefer, this is, in fact, some of the setup of this thing. These are the affluent people who are kind of unaware of what is actually a plot against them that was, and we don't want to give away too much more, but that is meant to, this is all explained in the first episode, redress some kind of cosmic imbalance. I don't know, just in general, how did this series flow for you? Was it able to hold your attention? And did you, as some people I think do, get confused watching this?
I didn't get confused, but it didn't suck me in immediately the way Justified City Primeval did. I was following the characters pretty well. There wasn't a lot of backstory, and so you had to keep supposing and creating a backstory for people to figure out why they were acting so mysteriously. I do have to say, over a lot of time, things were uncovered. And so I wasn't confused by the end, but I almost think it was Soderbergh's intention to make you wait to find out why people were behaving this way and what secrets they were holding.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, Helder, because this series has no real clear nexus. It's really not about the Claire Danes character, although at times it feels as though it's kind of about that. It's not specifically about any of the Guyanese characters, although there are these two young people, Louis and Natalia, brother and sister, who kind of represent the whole moral center. Soderbergh has said he really regards them as the main characters of the series. Mm-hmm. But this is, Helder, a real ensemble piece, I think, and you're sort of free to get interested in whoever you want to. You kind of choose your own adventure, although not the way you could with another Soderbergh project like Mosaic. But anyway, what was your overall reaction to it?
It's quite the dark adventure to take one on, for sure. It's interesting that it's written by Ed Solomon, who gave us Bill and Ted Face the Music and Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Hence, two of my favorite appearances are by Alex Winter as a lawyer for Timothy's character, and then there's also oh my gosh, Death ends up playing the cop, and I can't believe I just blanked on his name. He's one of my favorites in the whole
Norbert?
series. Yeah, no. Anyway, I found it like captivating. It brought me in. I kept wanting to see what was going to happen to each character. Definitely felt much more attached to the three Guyanese youth that are involved. Natalia, Javier, and Natalia's brother Louis, who bring the whole story around. But I did like the, pun intended, full circle. I thought there was this like insane kind of like long Return of the King-esque epilogue in the final episode that seemed to drag on a bit too much as we were trying to figure out what happens to everyone. But I did find it captivating. I felt there was a lot of like weird little MacGuffins that come through that you kind of want to know what happens there, but then they just end up dropping it in true like great neo-noir style. But I enjoyed it as much as one can enjoy. It was definitely a very like somber piece throughout the whole thing, and had some deep moments to it that I liked.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Sean, there's a way in which it's very, very interesting in the way that it kind of parcels out culpability. You really, the more that you watch it, the more that you understand what's going on, the more you realize how incredibly morally compromised everybody in this thing is just about, except for those two young Guyanese characters. But, Sean, I might have said something wrong, which is I said it ran on two parallel tracks. Theoretically, we could say three, because there's a third track, and that's law enforcement. Unexpectedly, Jim Gaffigan plays a pretty serious character, this, horribly corrupt. The other thing is you don't see a lot of law enforcement stuff that's really driven by the postal inspectors. I mean, there just aren't a lot of kick-ass series like that. But, Sean, you can talk about Gaffigan if you want. I'd actually love to hear your thoughts about him. But I don't know whether I'm saying her first name right or not, but I think the most amazing performance in this thing might be from Zazie Beetz. She plays this character, Mel Harmony, who she's a postal inspector. She's in incredible amounts of trouble because she has some pretty major untreated psychiatric issues. But she also has this kind of Columbo-like ability to just walk into a room and understand all kinds of things that are going on. And she has this, I don't know if I've seen this actor before, but she's kind of like if Sandra Bernhardt were Black and a crazy police officer. She has this kind of slightly, you just don't know what she's going to do from moment to moment. When she's on, I can't take my eyes off of her.
I agree. I think she was tremendous. I also just didn't realize postal inspectors had this much latitude and jurisdiction. Like
they're after you right now. They're coming to your door.
Like
they're going to kick your door down before this episode's over.
I didn't know postal inspectors carried guns and had like they could like have like what was it, like they could have like stakeout cars and like there was I learned so much from this from this story. But no, she was very she was a wild card in the sense of like like she was capable of kind of figuring out everything, and also like it also kind of calls into question like why she didn't have more power within the postal inspector, the totally powerful, all-powerful postal inspector office, except for the fact that like her personal life is kind of the reason she was in the position that she's in. But yeah, I think she was tremendous. I love Jim Gaffigan as well, just in the sense that like I think that's a great role for him, like that kind of like middle management type of guy. Like he felt like he was always eating a sandwich. Like he felt like he was always like like in cop movies where like every time they come to the chief's office, he's eating a sandwich. It was like that vibe from him.
No,
like, he's like, I got something better to do.
It's that, not just that, but when he gets up from eating his sandwich, his napkin and some gnarly little piece of like something that fell off his sandwich is there. He just walks away from his dirty napkin.
Yes, he has nothing better to do than to leave that behind. He's like, I can't be bothered with this.
Yeah, he's
really beneath the station of a postal inspector.
Right. He's very gross. But Sean, while I'm with you on this, I do think ultimately at the end we are invited to think about something. And I think we're invited to think about the kind of soft power of affluent corruption versus the maybe harder power of sort of, I don't know, state-defined criminal enterprises by people who are far more desperate. And I think we're kind of invited to weigh those two things too, right? There's sort of we start out with, well, there's one group of people who are trying to do a kidnapping, so they're obviously the bad actors here, and as we go along, we are invited to reconsider that, I think, several different times. And to me, that's actually pretty intriguing. I had to think more about this series, Sean, than I typically feel like I have to.
I agree. I also feel like it had like a similar quality to The Wire in the sense of like not only does it like sort of juxtapose those two like sides of the coin, as it were, but also like shows how they feed into each other. Like it's not these things are not happening separately. These like like all the affluent, sort of under the radar crime is feeding and fueling the crime that happens, that is like, on the front page of the New York Post, where like there's murders and kidnappings and stuff like that. That doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's like the system, it's a systemic issue as much as it is like an individual's choices.
Yeah, and there is a sense, I think, Elizabeth, of the kind of satisfied narcissism of the wealthy white people in the story. They live a very comfortable life. They make a lot of money doing not very much, actually. If you sort of look at like what the whole multi-million-dollar enterprise is built on, it's not built on very much. Although it turns out that they've made a lot of money a different way that we gradually know about. But once again, I sort of feel like one other thing I just want to quickly say, Elizabeth, and then just you can react any way you want. One of the things that I was struck by is that Guyana, first of all, I think Americans didn't know Guyana existed until Jonestown. I think Jonestown was unfortunately the moment at which people thought, oh, there's a place called Guyana and it's not in Africa, it's in South America? Really? No idea about that. And I think to this day people don't know very much about it. And it really is an example of just the worst aspects of colonialism played out over centuries. And one of the things that becomes clear in this series is that there's actually the largest ethnic population in Guyana is what I think they're called Indo-Guyanese people. They are people of Indian ethnicity brought over from India as indentured servants, I think by the Dutch during some of the time that they owned this place. But I don't know. Once again, Elizabeth, I think we're sort of invited to think about some things like this that don't get brought up on television that much.
Well, first of all, I want to agree with Sean that I had no idea that the U.S. Postal Service, I couldn't figure out their involvement for the longest time. And I think it's only toward the end when they talk about the way that the routing numbers were transferred, and that had something to do with the U.S. Postal Service. So that, I just want to say that confused me for a while. I had to actually Google USPIS to know that it was a thing. When it comes to the other thing, I think it's interesting that the colonialists, they pillaged so much and took so much away. And the funny thing at the end is something that is taken from the wealthy white people's home ends up discarded. Mm-hmm. And so there's something kind of interesting about that. And that she relinquished it, feeling some sort of sense of guilt in what the developers had done to the homeland of these people.
Yeah, and I feel as though some young performers who might not be on our radar that much did some pretty incredible performing here. Yes. These young Guyanese characters, Adia plays Natalia, Sheyi Cole plays, I have to say it the right way, Javier. His name is spelled the way we would say Xavier. I think it was suggested on The Wire that when the X-Men come back, it'll be Professor Javier. But Javier, who is the person I think most... Unfortunately, it's possible to bend him to some of the more nefarious ends that the kingpins want done, and then a young man named Gerald Jones playing Lewis. But I don't know. There's something very heartbreaking about the Guyanese part of this story, Helder, from the very beginning. The powerlessness of these people, the circumstances.
Specifically those three.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah. So specifically those three, like really, I mean, Natalia there's a really great moment where she's kind of yelling at Louis for showing up because he had messed up what she was trying to build for herself, and to get out of indentured servitude to the Guyanese mob kingpin played by CCH Pounder. And you see that story that is just prevalent throughout the United States that we don't talk about. That's just under the radar, of people coming here, relinquishing their passports to then be kind of indentured servants to other people from who have brought them here, that will use them and discard them the way they were doing. I mean, there's one that's just like immediately discarded as off the side of the road because of thinking that he might be an informant. But the three actors that played that we follow along throughout the series they're just magnificent. There's so much pathos in all of them, and there's a couple of scenes where I just like the pain that you hear in Louis's voice, Gerard Jones' portrayal of Louis when he's just trying to like appeal to Javier for help is just heartbreaking, and also seeing Javier wondering where the machinations are going, where he's is he trying to help Louis and Natalia, or is he completely under the sway of Garmin? You kind of hope he's going one way versus the other and just following his path and unknowingly following what he's doing. But then one of the things I felt about this show is that you do kind of start to see where things are going a little too soon, but whether it's going to happen that way or not, just seeing it unfold is also part of the mystique of the show that I enjoyed.
Yeah, I mean, an awful lot happens in the first episode. I mean, I really recommend to everybody who's even mildly interested in this conversation, watch the first episode, watch it with closed captioning, because the Guyanese accents are often rather difficult to parse, like it said. And also there's a Guyanese slang that's then folded into the accents too. So there's a lot of that. And so, Sean, as we're kind of wrapping this up, one thing I would say about this is I think there's something very literary about this series. I mean, even the title, Full Circle, I mean, this involves these kind of ritualistic circles that are drawn in Washington Square Park in order to facilitate the kind of mystical aspects of retributionary kidnapping. But there's also a sense of justice coming full circle, or at least the misdeeds of the past coming full circle. There's also a way in which this is really about two circles, a circle of white people with complex family connections and secrets from one another, and then the Guyanese circle as well. Again, I feel, and you're one of the more voracious readers I know, Sean, I feel like there's something kind of almost bookish and literary about the series.
There absolutely is, and I was actually kind of surprised. I mean, I was aware of the series for a while just because Soderbergh has a bunch of stuff, like he has that deal with Max. But I thought it was I was surprised to find that it wasn't adapted from a novel of some sort, because it does, like you said, have a very literary quality, like in terms of just how the story wraps up, but also how many balls are in the air at once. Actually, I like that a lot about it, because I feel like, not to be the 1 millionth person to decry the sort of death of the mid-budget film in Hollywood, but this is definitely the type of a story that would have been a book that was adapted and became a movie. And I feel like TV has also lended itself to be a great space for adapting novels and such, because there's more space to kind of get into the depths of all the characters. If you did that in a movie, I mean, you'd have to cut out Javier and Louis would have to be one character. There would be so much less space to flesh it all out.
Right. Actually, I'll just say this for those of you who've watched it, and this won't spoil anything because it's not in there. They actually did cut there's a whole plot. So Dennis Quaid, who plays the father of Claire Danes' character, is this kind of celebrated foodie, he's not exactly a chef, I don't think. He's a guy who puts out sauces. But it turns out that he stole his sauce recipe from a taco stand somewhere in New York City and never gave them any of the money and never gave them any of the that's cut out of the thing. But it's just sort of more of the kind of sense that we feel that, there are exploiters kind of on both sides. All right.
It's alluded to. It is alluded to,
yeah. I don't know why I heard this, but I think there was a full arc that Soderbergh or Solomon decided they just couldn't bear the weight of it with everything else going on there. All right, so we got to take a break. We're going to come back. The Oliphantissance, if there is such a thing, will continue with Justified City Primeval. Here we go. All right, we're switching Oliphant projects. With us today for the news is Elizabeth Kiefer, Helder Mira, and Sean Murray. Justified, City Primeval, resumes the story of U.S. Marshal, or Deputy U.S. Marshal, whatever he is, Raylan Givens. He is 18 years away from the conclusion of the original series Justified, which was mainly set in Harlan County, Kentucky. Now he's based in Miami, but he and his daughter are on a road trip. His daughter Willa, who is played by Timothy Oliphant's real-life daughter. They're on a road trip. The road trip's interrupted. I'm not going to explain the whole thing. It's too damn complicated. But it ends, or it culminates or precipitates from the bombing of a judge's car. And then he's stuck in Detroit, and he has to help with this investigation. We've seen this kind of plot before. Yeah, I think you should stay here. It's basically what happens to Sidney Poitier in the heat of the night. No, you stay there, that crummy town. Don't come back to Philadelphia. Solve that murder. So anyway, let's hear a little clip from Justified City Primeval. I don't know if I have to say too much. Ingenue Ellis Taylor is Carolyn Wilder. She's a defense attorney based in Detroit. Timothy Oliphant is, of course, Raylan Givens. And you're going to hear the sort of the action villain of the piece, Boyd Holbrook, who plays Clement Mansell. I think sort of the evil, younger, and more full of vitality version of Raylan Givens. Here we go, B1 Gene.
You have reason to suspect my client is involved in the murder of Judge Guy.
And Rose Doyle, yes.
And what is that?
Witnesses.
He ain't got no witnesses. He's blowing smoke up your ass.
Not another word unless I ask you a question.
Can I ask him a question?
What is it?
Was he driving around a Range Rover last night? License number 8?
He's not going to answer that.
No, go on. I want to hear how you're going to lay the judge on.
Not another word.
He's dying. You got this idea of what happened to the judge. You just can't get nobody to what's the word? Corroborate it.
Corroborate. Hang around courtrooms and county jails. You learn some words, don't you?
Yeah, you learn a few things about lawmen, too.
This ought to be good.
Only two kinds of guys out in the street chasing bad guys at your age. Ones who got passed over for the big chair, and the ones that just love it so much, they're going to have to be dragged off. Only question is, will they be breathing when it happens?
So Elizabeth Kiefer, I love listening to the audio, just the pure audio of that clip. I talked about it as we were emailing too. You know, at the end there, it really sounds like two versions of the same person talking. Obviously, Raylan Givens is the hero of Justified, Always and Forever. This guy is about as bad as you can get. He really is a very dangerous person and a very ruthless person and a guy who kills more or less for fun at times. But there's something about the little back and forth there. Their voices start to sound a little bit the same. There's a two sides of a coin thing, I think, but feel free to shoot down my idea.
Okay, I will. Well, first of all, we had a discussion on email about whether people have seen the previous series or not. And I think this is another case where I didn't conflate them at all, because clearly to me, the Raylan character is the good guy, and the Mansell is clearly the bad guy. But I loved them both. And I found them both sexy and interesting and just visually so much fun to watch. But I didn't get so much of that because I didn't know about the dark past of the Raylan character. And now I'm very intrigued to go back and watch the first, is it 2 series, I think, that's before this, to see.
If you mean seasons, way more than that. There's like 6 seasons. You're going to be busy for a really long time.
Oh my God, there's 6 seasons. Anyway, but I'd love to just see more of that, because I love this right off the bat. And it reminded me a lot of another series that I also loved right off the bat, which is Poker Face. And even though it's, helmed by a woman, Natasha Lyonne, I found a lot of things similar in the grittiness of it. I mentioned that the car that Mansell steals looks just like the one she drives around in, although it was a Barracuda versus a Chevelle. But the big titles of what town they're in splayed across the screen. Some of the music choices were very similar, and almost made me think the same director was involved. But absolutely loved it, and was not a Timothy Oliphant fan, unlike Maya Rudolph, until this series, in which I just fell in love with him. And I would not have fallen in love with him in the Full Circle movie, where I thought he was very passive and a very sort of a minor character. But in this one, the way he moves through the world, I found fascinating.
Right. So just a couple of things here. The Papulian through line here is he's kind of a rotten father in both of them. Or a highly flawed father in both of them. The Maya Rudolph references to the series The Good Place, in which Maya Rudolph plays God, basically, but in a judge's robes. And God has a tremendous amount of free time on her hands, and so she binges a lot of television, and she gets kind of obsessed with Timothy Oliphant. And eventually he appears as himself. He's materialized by the artificial intelligence Janet, much to God's delight. So, yeah, I mean, Helder, there's a way in which the 6 season, 78 episode Justified series establishes a highly complex character. Obviously a hero, obviously the good guy, obviously the guy who will do the right thing under almost all circumstances, but also a guy who has a lot of trouble fitting into systems, a guy who, really, it's the old cliche, the two-fisted hero who doesn't play by the rules. Well, that's kind of who this guy is. And they're still playing with that idea that he's a hero, but not necessarily a hero who's going to get his paperwork done.
Yeah, I mean, I had to go back and I think I said in my emails that one of the things I love to do is just watch that first episode, the pilot episode of the original series, because it just is such a great short film in and of itself, where the first 3 minutes essentially like establishes what his character is like, where he will go by any way, or he'll do anything any means to like get his man. And in this case, he like kills a guy right in front of everyone at lunch. And then at the very end of the episode, you actually get like why he did that, what he was pursuing. And much like what's going on with that two-sided dichotomy that you're talking about between Raylan and Clement, where it's like he in the first season, in the first series, will do anything, will not like will just draw when he needs to, as long as it's quote unquote justified, and will always find a way to justify that draw, down to the very last episode of the series, where he wanted to basically finally put down his nemesis and just like throws a gun and wants him to take the gun and
don't tell anybody.
Sorry.
Spoilers. No spoilers.
But anyway, in this, what we get is he seems much more, I think you called it, with the Lion in Winter attitude. He's much more reserved in this one. I'm not getting that same like ready to jump into the fray that he would have in the 6 seasons. And I think that is because of his trying to be a better father, or at least a father figure to Willa, who's, an interesting dynamic we've discussed via emails, but it's just I know a lot of the old fans have not been crazy about her, but she does bring a little extra softening to Raylan. And then there is that one episode where you see that switch, and we get that old Raylan back as soon as Willa is threatened by Clement, and even Carolyn Wilder has that moment of like saying, you are, I understand that is your daughter, but like not everyone gets that opportunity to avenge her.
She says is we should explain this, Helder, and I'm going to go over to you, Sean. So Carolyn Wilder is a black defense attorney, and she's often thrust into the role of defending some of the more nefarious people in this story, especially this guy Clement Mansell, and part of that is because she has gigantic debts that are thrust upon her from another source, but Sean, to me, the most exciting thing about this series possibly is this rather unusual crackle of sexual excitement between Carolyn Wilder, a black defense attorney, and Raylan Givens, who, for the 6 seasons we saw him in Harlan County, Kentucky, I guess the whole sociological landscape was different there. But I think she's the first woman I've seen who could really kind of match him, go toe to toe with him. And there are some strong women in the original Justified series, but there's a way in which she's a little bit like him too. She has to do a lot of stuff that isn't necessarily the most savory stuff in the world because that's her job.
Yeah. Aunjanue Ellis is just great. Yeah. Just from the first scene in the with them together in the I guess I can't call it the pilot since this is the second series, but it's the pilot episode of this series. When they're in the courtroom and she's sort of antagonizing him and getting him to reveal that he sort of did not treat her client with the utmost respect as is expected of a U.S. Marshal. She's like there's very few people who are given the opportunity to kind of have that sort of energy that she brings to it. And this guy, I mean, I guess you wouldn't call Raylan Givens very serious in terms of he doesn't take every part of the job serious, but he's very serious in terms of like his dedication to the job. And I think she kind of undercuts him in the way that he often, serves to undercut everyone around him. That makes it very exciting.
Yeah, Sean, I think I said this sort of in the emails, but and I actually recently went back and watched quite a bit of the original Justified, so it's kind of fresh in my mind. And it's not as though Raylan Givens in those 6 seasons of Justified isn't often kind of made fun of. I mean, he is often made fun of, and his just out of controlness is made fun of, and things that he fails to understand are made fun of. But there's something going on here where it feels like people are sort of a beat ahead of him, particularly even conversationally, in a way that I don't remember so much. I mean, this villain, you heard the exchange between the two of them, and he says that whole thing about there's only 2 kinds of guys who are still out on the street at your age, and kind of takes him down a little peg with that, and also has his number. His real life daughter, who plays Willa, his fictional daughter, she's often, every bit a match for the kind of Raylan Givens back and forth, the kind of banter. She often has a comeback for something he's got to say. And as you're suggesting, Sean, I feel as though this character of Carolyn also, it's not like she doesn't know what to say to him. And I think at one point she says something like, yeah, you know what my job is, and I know what your job is too. There's a sort of sense of knowingness about her. He's not ahead of her in any way, Sean.
Right. And I think that kind of lends itself to the sort of Lion in Winter sort of thing we were talking about. And just like the sense that, I mean, he's an older, he's not as sharp as he was in his youth. You know what I mean? People have kind of caught up to him, and like his shtick has gotten old, even for people who are like newer to his life. He's like he's not the fastest gun in the West, as it were, anymore. And especially with a daughter, like, I mean, you could be the most clever person on earth. Your daughter is just gonna like get the best of you no matter what. You just can't keep up. You know what I mean?
Right. And I think that's played very well. Elizabeth, we should say a little bit more about the cast. I think this is also a remarkable cast. It has people who work a lot. Both of these series, Full Circle and Justified City Primeval, they have people who've just done a lot of work in a lot of places. Full Circle has a few people that you've never seen before. We've talked about Ingenue. Ellis, I'm going to mention Adelaide Clemens a little bit in my endorsements. She plays a character called Sandy Stanton, who's kind of attached to this horrible villain. Vondi Curtis Hall, you've seen in a lot of things. Marin Ireland, who is a product of the Hart School of Music and Acting program here. And Elizabeth, both of us noticed, I think in slightly different ways, Norbert Leo Butz, who plays this kind of quintessential Detroit cop in this, and the kind of Detroit cop who has a Detroit way of doing things because I'm from Detroit. I know the Detroit way because I'm a Detroit guy. And I don't know, like Norbert Leo Butz, I just mainly have seen him in musicals. I saw him in the original cast of Wicked. And it's just so interesting to see him in that. But I focus on any actor or actors you want to, Elizabeth.
Well, I had to make a cheat sheet for both because there were so many main characters in both series that, in fact, I said Norbert in the first segment, and I had my sheet turned the wrong way. But anyway, I in the beginning, he was extremely irritating, and I said that he sort of was exemplifying the country, not him, but Raylan coming in was kind of like the country guy who comes in and shows the city guys how it's really done. And in the beginning, Norbert was doing things in a way where they were brutal and impulsive and really weren't helping at all. And, sort of Raylan would sort of be resigned about that. But then once it went along a little more, Norbert character became less brutal and impulsive, it seemed, and a little bit more of a team player. And they don't really say why that happened, if he gained respect for Raylan in the quieter, less impulsive way he did things. I have no idea, but he was a real standout to me. And I also love Sweetie, the Vondi Curtis Hall character who owned the bar. just he's got the most expressive face, and whenever he was on the screen, it was another person you just couldn't take your eyes off of.
Absolutely. So, Helder, one of the things that Justified has done very well in the past, and we should say this is also based on an Elmore Leonard novel, but not an Elmore Leonard novel that had Raylan Givens in it, certainly not as the protagonist. But I've always been kind of impressed by the way the writers of this thing take kind of the beats and colors of Elmore Leonard's prose and just write new versions of it, write new content for it. And it still kind of feels like Elmore Leonard. I mean, there are some speeches that, as we were emailing around this morning, that I singled out and said to you guys, I couldn't tell you whether they're ripped from the book or somebody just made them up, and it sounds like Elmore Leonard wrote them.
Maybe it's AI.
Could be. Hope not.
And I was also kind of shocked that this doesn't actually carry over any of the original writers from the original series. Michael Dinner comes to it after Graham Yost, who produced and wrote much of the original 6 seasons, I should say. So it's great to see like people adapt to Elmer Leonard, and there is something just so great about Leonard's like fast-paced kind of like back and forth that he does that were pronounced in the first season or series, and is clearly going through this series as well. That like you said, I think it's great the way they've been able to like pick up on that and adapt it. I remember like watching Out of Sight and seeing how Steven Soderbergh pretty much just lifted everything from the novel into it while adapting it, just to bring it back full circle to Soderbergh as well. And,
full circle.
Elmore Leonard.
I see what you just did there with the full circle. So, Sean, we have to wrap up here. Although I think it might be worth just pausing for a moment and talking about. It's interesting because I think the Guyanese in Full Circle are treated very, very seriously and in a very detailed and nuanced way. In this, maybe the weird ethnicity or at least the exotic ethnicity that is dealt with, maybe a little bit less seriously, are Albanian gangsters. Although, Sean, I do feel as though there's the kingpin of the gangsters who gives this little speech. He's sitting there in what appears to be like a nursing home that he owns or something like that. And he says, of course, that justice is really no justice at all. It is only satisfaction of a mandate for the appearance of order. But order and justice, they're not the same thing. If I wanted to restore order, I could, of course, instruct Skender to cooperate. But I am not interested in order. Justice, however, justice is meted out in accordance with the action it remedies. And in this case, justice requires more than the law is willing or able to provide. I mean, Sean, that's some top-notch writing there, too. I mean, even if the Albanians are a little bit stereotyped here, I thought that was very cool.
That's incredible. It's talking about the novelistic qualities of both of these shows. I mean, that sounds like something from Blood Meridian. Like that sounds like something the judge in Blood Meridian? Like that's incredible. Like it's like it almost forgives. I don't want to besmirch the Albanian people of the world in any way, so I won't say anything but to say you guys are great, and I'm sure many of you have great quotes like that up your sleeve, and I hope to hear more of it. I want to meet some Albanians and regale me with your quotes.
Right, we're going to do Albanian quote day very soon on the nose. We got to take a break here, so we'll have time to make some recommendations when we come back.
On this lonely road, trying to make it home, doing it by my lonesome, pissed off, who wants some? I'm fighting for my soul. God, get at your boy. You try to go, God, fall back. I go hard on this lonely road, trying to make it home, doing it by my lonesome, pissed off, who wants some? I see them long, hard times to come.
And we're back. Time to say some thank yous. Cat Pastor's out right now. So we've got the big guy. We've got Gina Matruda in there as our technical producer. Jonathan McPants is always the producer of The Nose. Our great panel now is going to make some recommendations to you. Sean Murray, why don't you get us going? What are you going to recommend?
In honor of these sort of novelistic crime stories that we just talked about, I wanted to recommend a crime novel that from a few years ago by Colson Whitehead, Harlem Shuffle. Just very great, like light crime novel about a furniture store owner in Harlem in the 1960s who moonlights as a fence for stolen goods. And it just came out with a sequel, I think 2 weeks ago, called Crook Manifesto, which I haven't read yet, but I'm very excited about. So I think it just ties in very well with what we watched for this week.
Very nicely woven in there. Very impressive. Elizabeth Kiefer, how about you? What are you going to recommend?
Well, I also have a crime novel, a murder mystery called A Winter Grave by Peter May. And the cool thing is it's set in Scotland in 2051. So it's interesting to see what's still around and what the author has imagined, especially for transportation, but also all of the flooding that has resulted from climate change that has really changed the entire world. Also, I wanted to recommend a restaurant because it's brand new and starting out. It's in Unionville. It's called Taste of Nawab, and it's an Indian restaurant. I've already been there, going there again tonight, and it is fabulous. I'd love to support them. It's on Mill Street in Unionville.
I know exactly where it is, yes, and I'm dying to try it as well. That's great. Helder Mira, how about yourself?
So I have to make up for my last endorsement last time, which was Secret Invasion, and that failed. So I'm going to go with a really great graphic novel that's out, which is marking its 10th anniversary, at least the first volume, which is March, the autobiographical graphic novel by Representative John Lewis, as written by John Lewis and Andrew Aiden, Trinity alum, and illustrated by Nate Powell. There are 3 volumes. They're beautifully written and illustrated. Highly recommend, and please do try to pick them up at your local comic book stores, because we do need to support those more than Amazon and other big shops. And then the other one I would recommend is the late Darwin Cook's adaptations of Richard Stark's Parker novels. He did 4 adaptations, beautifully illustrated, and just to tie in with the whole crime novels that we've been talking about. So highly recommend all of those books.
All right, so you guys have inspired me to make slightly different recommendations. I guess the first one I would say is the original Justified series is available on Hulu. I think it's an FX thing, but FX is sitting inside Hulu. But and it is 6 seasons, 78 episodes. You can decide to stay with it or not. It has some of the most amazing casting I've seen, just incredible characters. And if you enjoy Margot Martindale, for example, she plays just an unforgettable villain on that. I would also single out McKelty Williamson, who plays Limehouse Walker. Is that his name, Limehouse? I think it's Walker. And he's also just tremendous in this. Then there are all kinds of incredible, knotted up, gnarly, complicated, twisting plots. Also, obviously, Walton Goggins. Walton Goggins kind of made his career playing Boyd Crowder in that series. So it's fun, It's fun and it's interesting and it's exciting and it will hold your attention. So I wasn't going to mention crime novels, but since we did, I've already endorsed him before, and I'm doing an unusual thing. So Adrian McKinty I was interested to hear Elizabeth talk about Peter May. He's a pretty famous Scottish detective writer. Adrian McKinty is an amazing North Ireland-born crime fiction writer. He's now in America, and some of his more recent thrillers have been very American in nature. But his Sean Duffy series takes place in Belfast and its environs. And he's a remarkable writer and a kind of just like all the music cues that he mentions and stuff. You really have to be on top of your game culturally to just follow all the little jokes he makes and stuff like that. So, and I liked him so much, and I've never done this before. I'm bringing him to Hartford. He's going to come be with me at the Mark Twain House on September 7th, the way things are playing out here. And I'm pretty excited about that. I think it's September 7th. But it's so anyway, I would really recommend his books. Maybe start with book 1 of either the Sean Duffy or Michael Forsythe series. They're terrific. And then lastly, because I have a little bit of time here, I thought one of the really good performances that was given in Justified City Primeval was by, I think she's an Australian actress, but she plays Americans very well. Adelaide Clemens plays this kind of luckless Sandy Stanton who has attached herself to a very violent man. And is kind of, messed up herself. Although at one point, it realizes at one point, I think she has potential, though. So she's terrific. There's a series that like 8 people have seen called Rectify, which sounds a lot like Justify. It's a very different kind of series. You can buy it, I found out today, on Amazon Prime. Almost everybody I know who's ever watched Rectify feels like it's one of the 20 great series of all time. Now, this is going to require for one season of Rectify a $15 investment from you. But if I've intrigued you at all, it's about a man getting out of prison in a small southern town for a crime he didn't commit and trying to adjust to real life there. Anyway, those are enough recommendations. Thanks so much to Elizabeth Kiefer, to Helder Mira, to Sean Murray. And we're going to say goodbye now. Thanks to Gina Amatruda for stepping in, too. Here we go.